Imagine standing on a beach. Behind you, the ocean. In front of you, dry land. And every instinct you have, be every story your ancestors passed down, tells you the same thing. The water is where death lives. The deep, the dark, the things with teeth. But what if I told you there was a moment, a real moment in this planet's history when that instinct would have gotten you killed? When the smartest thing any living creature could do was turn its back on solid ground and walk into the waves. This isn't a thought experiment. It happened. For millions of years, the land became something out of a nightmare. And the ocean, the place we fear most, became the last safe room on Earth. Stay with me, because once you understand why, you'll never look at a shoreline the same way again. Let's go back, way back, not thousands of years, millions, to a world that would feel completely alien to you, even though it was this same Earth, spinning under the same sun. Here's the thing most people never stop to think about. We treat the land as home. It's where we built everything, our cities, our farms, our entire idea of safety. Solid ground under your feet feels like the most natural thing in the world. But that feeling is a luxury. It's recent, and it was paid for in blood by everything that came before us. Because for most of life's history, the land wasn't a home. It was a battlefield, an open arena with nowhere to hide, where the things at the top of the food chain had spent millions of years perfecting one single skill, finding you and ending you. And I want you to really sit with that image for a second. Picture an open plain. No buildings, no weapons, no fire. Just you, exposed under a wide sky. And somewhere out there, something bigger than you, faster than you, that has never once in its life questioned whether it could win. That was the daily reality. Not for a bad week, not for a rough season, for an age. So life did what life always does when one door becomes a death trap. It started looking for another door. And that other door, the one that had been sitting there the whole time, quiet and cold and deep, was the water. But here's where it gets strange. Because to understand why the water was safer, you first have to understand what exactly had turned the land into such a slaughterhouse. And the answer isn't one monster. It's a whole world of them. So what was out there? What made the land a place you'd want to escape? Start with the obvious ones. The predators built like siege weapons, animals with skulls the size of a man, and jaws that didn't just bite, they crushed. Teeth that weren't made for slicing, but for turning bone into powder. And the unsettling part isn't the size, it's the patience. These weren't mindless killing machines. They were hunters. They watched. They waited. They learned the paths their prey took to water, and they were already there when the prey arrived. But the giants were never the whole story. They almost never are. The real terror of the ancient land was that danger came in every form imaginable. There were things that ran you down in the open, yes, but there were also things that ambushed from the tall grass, things that hunted in packs, coordinating like a single mind with too many teeth, things low to the ground that you wouldn't even see until it was far too late. And above all of it, and I mean that literally, there was the sky. We forget about the sky. We look up and we see birds, harmless, small. But there was a time when looking up meant watching a shadow the size of a small plain bank against the clouds and start to descend. Death didn't just come from the bushes or the riverbank. It came from above, silent, with nothing you could do about it. Now, stack all of that together. Ground level, tall grass, open plain, the sky itself. Every direction was a threat. There was no safe angle, no moment to relax. And then, picture it, there's the water's edge. Still, quiet, waiting. Now I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. The water? Safer? The water is where the real monsters live. Everybody knows that. The deep has always been the one place humans refuse to go without armor and machines. And you're right, the water was never empty. It had its own giants, its own jaws, its own shadows moving under the surface. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you the ocean was some peaceful sanctuary. It wasn't. But here's the difference. The difference that changed everything. On land, you were the target. You were meat walking around on an open plate, and 100 different things had spent millions of years evolving for the single purpose of catching exactly something like you. In the water, you were something else. You were unfamiliar. You were an unknown shape moving through a world that hadn't built its hunters around you. The predators of the deep were terrifying, but they were tuned to their own prey, the things that had always lived there. A creature stepping in from the land wasn't on the menu yet. It hadn't been hunted into a pattern. It was, for a brief and precious window of time, a glitch in the system. And that glitch was survival. Think about what that actually means. It means safety, real safety, was never about finding a place with no danger. There's no such place. It never existed. Safety was about finding the place where you weren't the one being hunted, where the rules hadn't been written with your name in them yet. That's a colder kind of truth than we like to admit. But the animals that survived didn't need it to be comfortable. They just needed it to be true. Here's where the story turns from survival into something stranger, something almost unbelievable. Because some animals didn't just visit the water to escape, they never came back. Think about that. A creature whose ancestors had fought their way onto land, clawed their way out of the sea over countless generations, grew legs, grew lungs, earned the right to breathe air and walk on solid ground. That was the great triumph of life, getting out of the water. And then, when the land turned into a nightmare, some of them gave it all back. They turned around and walked into the sea, and they stayed. Generation after generation, their legs got shorter. Their bodies got longer, smoother, built for water instead of land. The thing their ancestors had spent millions of years escaping became the thing that saved them. We don't usually think of evolution as retreat. We like the story of progress. Onward, upward, always forward. But evolution doesn't care about our stories. It cares about one thing only: what keeps you alive long enough to pass it on. And sometimes, what keeps you alive is going backward, surrendering the ground you fought for, choosing the cold, dark water over the bright, deadly land. There's something almost human in that, if you let yourself feel it. The idea that the safest move isn't always to push forward, that sometimes the thing everyone told you to fear is the only place left that won't kill you. That survival can look, from the outside, exactly like giving up. These animals didn't know they were making history. They were just trying to live one more day. But that one more day, repeated across millions of years, rewrote the entire shape of life on this planet. But every window closes. That's the part of this story nobody wants to hear. Because the water was only safe for as long as it didn't know you. And nature is patient. Nature pays attention. The moment land animals started slipping into the sea in real numbers, something began to shift. The predators of the deep, the ones tuned to their own ancient prey, started to notice these new shapes. These soft, slow, unfamiliar things moving through their world. And they adapted. They always adapt. Slowly, over a span of time longer than our minds can really hold, the ocean learned the taste of the newcomers. The glitch got patched. The unfamiliar became familiar, and the familiar became food. The same evolutionary engine that had made the water a refuge began turning it into just another hunting ground. One more place where you could be the meal instead of the survivor. So, the window shut. The brief, strange age when the sea was the safest room on Earth came to an end. Not with some great catastrophe, but quietly. With predators getting a little better. With prey running out of places that hadn't learned their scent. And that's the thing about safety, that this whole story keeps whispering, if you listen closely. It's never permanent. It's never a place you arrive at and stay. It's a moving thing, a temporary gap between one danger and the next. The animals that survived weren't the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who happened to be standing in the safe spot during the brief moment it existed, and who were willing to move the instant it didn't. The land emptied of its old terrors, the water filled with new ones, and life, as always, kept walking the thin line between them. And if you're still here with me, this far into the story, I want to stop for just a second and say something real. Most people clicked away a long time ago. They wanted the quick scare, the easy fact, and they left. But you stayed. You wanted to actually understand it. And that tells me you're exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. So, if you haven't yet, take 1 second to subscribe and walk with us. Because every week we go back into these lost worlds and pull out the stories that time tried to bury. You belong here with the rest of us who never stopped looking up at that shadow in the sky and wondering what it really was. Now, back to the water. Because there's one last thing about this that I can't let you leave without. We've talked about this like it's ancient history. Something safely locked away millions of years ago behind glass where it can't touch us. But the pattern never actually ended. It's still running. Right now, every living thing on this planet, including you, is standing in some version of that shoreline. There's a danger, you know, the land, the familiar one, the one your instincts scream about. And there's a danger you don't, the dark water, the unknown one. And survival, real survival, has always come down to reading which one is about to turn on you and being willing to move before it does. The animals that made it didn't have maps. They didn't have warnings. They just had instinct and timing and the nerve to walk into the thing everyone else was running from. That was enough. Sometimes that's all it's ever been. So here we are back on that beach where we started. The ocean behind you, the land in front of you, and that old instinct still whispering the same thing it always has. The water is where death lives. But now you know the secret it's been hiding. That there was a time when that instinct was a lie, when the bravest, smartest, most alive thing a creature could do was turn its back on the solid ground everyone trusted and walk into the cold, dark thing everyone feared. They didn't do it because they were fearless. They did it because they were paying attention. Because they understood something we spend our whole lives forgetting. That the ground beneath your feet is only as safe as the moment you're standing on it. The shoreline is still there, it always will be. And the water is still cold, and still dark, and still waiting. The only question that ever mattered is the same one those animals answered millions of years ago without a single word. Which way do you walk? If this stayed with you, do one thing for me. Follow the channel so you don't lose your way back here. and share this with 5 people who'd feel it too. Then tell me, honestly, in the comments, what's the lost world you want me to take you into next? I'm reading every single one. I'll see you at the next shoreline.